The ping over the sunken fortune. June 14th, 1972. 310 feet below the North Atlantic, off the coast of Iceland. The control room of USS Seawolf is dark, tight, and humming. Red battle lamps wash over steel panels and sweating faces. Gauges glow, needles quiver. The air tastes like coffee, stale sweat, and recycled oxygen. You can hear everything: the low thrum of the reactor, the faint whine of the propeller, the constant, nervous breathing of men listening for something they can't see. And then it comes. Ping. Soft, distant, but unmistakable. The sonar shack goes dead silent. Sonar man first class Mike Smith freezes with his headphones pressed tight against his ears, eyes locked on the greenish blur of the active sonar display. A faint return is creeping across the scope, ghostly and slow. Not a sub, not a merchant ship. Something else. He swallows hard. Con, sonar, he calls out, voice just a little too tight. I've got a contact. Bearing 182. Deep. Real deep. At the periscope stand, Commander Jack Halford leans over the chart table, pencil hovering above the North Atlantic grid. He's been on boats since '54. Nothing rattles him quickly. But the way Smitty said deep sends a small chill into his spine. Classified? Halford asks. Smitty adjusts the gain, filters out the scene noise, narrows the bandwidth. The contact firms up, a metallic structure, static, sitting on the seafloor. And something moving above it, small, deliberate, mechanical. He frowns. That ain't terrain, sir. That's man-made. Big metal hull, no prop signature. Sitting on the bottom. And above it, I got a working platform. Small crane noises, intermittent. Something's operating down there. Halford straightens. A wreck. And someone working it. He glances at the map. Cold, black water. Deep trench. No commercial lanes. No reason to be here, unless you want to disappear. The XO, Lieutenant Commander Harris, steps closer. Soviets? He asks. Halford doesn't answer right away. He looks at the position again. This patch of ocean had been flagged in a quiet, classified briefing back in Norfolk. An old World War II sinking. Neutral flag ship. Lost with all hands. No survivors. And a rumor. A rumor about what was in her hold. Halford taps the chart. Right on the position they're sitting over. Bring us to 5 knots. Hold depth. Let's get ears only. No active pings. Aye. 5 knots. Maintain depth, the diving officer replies, hands moving across the controls. The submarine eases through the dark, like a steel shark drifting toward a wounded animal. In sonar, the picture sharpens. Smitty adjusts the fine-tuning, his brows knitting. I've got winch noise, metallic contacts, intermittent tool strikes. No screw noise, no cavitation. They're anchored, working a fixed point. Harris leans in. What the hell are they doing out here? Smitty doesn't look up. Sir, whatever it is, they're not fishing. A junior officer at the plot table mutters, half to himself. Deep diving rig, middle of nowhere, probably just oceanographic research. Halford gives him a look. Since when do research ships turn their transponders off? No one answers. The captain's mind turns back to the briefing. The ship that went down here in '45, torpedoed in the confusion of the last months of the war. A quiet diplomatic note. A regrettable accident. And a whispered line from naval intelligence. Some people think she was carrying more than machinery. Some people think there was gold. Halford looks at the glowing dots on the sonar repeater. A wreck on the bottom. A rig above it. No ID, no call sign. Sonar, he says calmly. Any chance they've got us? Smitty listens hard, filters again, shakes his head slowly. Negative, sir. No active search. They're focused straight down. Whatever's down there has their full attention. Halford exhales. All right, then we watch. He bends over the chart again. Because if the Soviets, or whoever this is, found the wreck first, they might not just be pulling up gold bars. They might be pulling up leverage. Money without fingerprints. A fortune that never officially existed. And, in the Cold War, that kind of ghost money could buy anything. Halford looks up, the decision forming behind his eyes. Bring us around for a slow circle. Keep us masked in the thermal layer. I want to see how long they plan to sit on that grave. The sub turns silently in the black. Above a forgotten wreck. Above a rumored treasure. Above a secret both East and West would kill to own. You're standing there in the control room, feeling it too. This isn't about exploration. It's about who gets to the sunken gold first. Commander Halford stands at the center, arms folded, watching the sonar screen as if it might blink. Below them, the ocean floor disappears into a black abyss. Somewhere down there lies the wreck, a World War II freighter swallowed by time, and above it, the unknown salvage crew working like ghosts. "Sir," sonar man Smitty murmurs, eyes locked on the waterfall display. "I'm getting distinct mechanical signatures. Winch drum, hydraulic actuator, something cutting or grinding." He adjusts the gain. These guys are not amateurs. The XO steps beside him. "Commercial rig?" Smitty shakes his head without looking up. "No way. Civilian rigs don't run silent. And they sure as hell don't operate this deep." Halford moves to the periscope well, gripping the cold metal of the handles. Not to look, but to think. Above them, the surface is a world away. Down here, sound is everything. Even the Seawolf's heartbeat is measured in decibels. He looks over at his navigator. "What's the depth of that trench again?" 340 feet at the shallow edge, the navigator replies. Drops to nearly 800 beyond the shelf. Halford whistles quietly. So they're perched on the edge of hell. A young sonar tech calls out suddenly, excitement breaking through his voice. "I've got metallic impact on the wreck hull. Something hit the steel pretty big." Halford leans forward. "Are they cutting into her?" "Affirmative, sir." Sounds like a rotary cutter or thermal lance. "Whatever they're doing, they're opening something." The XO exhales sharply. Damn, they know what they're looking for. The captain watches the drifting symbols on the sonar plot, jaw tightening. If the Soviets were slicing into the wreck, it wasn't curiosity, it was purpose, precision, intent, and intent meant intelligence. He motions to his radio man. "Secure the transmitter. No outgoing signals. We stay dark." "Aye, sir." The order passes through the control room like a ripple of understanding. No transmissions, no pings, no mistakes. They weren't just observing a salvage. They were spying on a theft. Seawolf eases closer, nose angled slightly downward, gliding through the thermal layer that masks her signature. The hull creaks faintly under pressure, steel protesting softly like an old sailor's bones. Halford whispers to the diving officer. "Hold her steady. 5 degrees down bubble. Keep us off their bow." The diving officer nods, adjusting the planes with the light touch of a pianist. Meanwhile, in sonar, Smitty stiffens. "Con, sonar, new contact." Halford turns. "What VE you got?" Smitty presses the headphones tight. Very faint, but regular. Metallic. Short bursts. Something small and moving. Harris stepped closer. "A diver?" Smitty shakes his head. "No diver goes down that deep. Not in 72. He listens again, hands trembling now. "Sir, that is a remote submersible." Halford exchanges a long look with his XO. "So, it is the Soviets." Because only the Soviets at this point in the Cold War had deep-diving remote vehicles capable of working at these depths. Small mechanical crabs they used to tap cables, steal sonar arrays, or inspect hulls. But this one wasn't tapping anything. It was digging. Halford walks slowly back to the chart table, tracing the outline of the forgotten World War II wreck. A standard cargo manifest shouldn't interest a superpower. But whispers said the ship was carrying something else. Something sealed. Something never listed on paper. A Soviet submersible scraping at the wreck's hull confirmed it. "They're after the gold," the XO mutters. Halford nods once, eyes hard. "And if they get it, they get more than gold." He turns sharply. "Navigator, plot us a tight circle around the wreck. Keep us unseen. I want every angle, every sound." "Aye, Captain." The Seawolf curves through the abyss, sliding silently across the wreck like a shark circling a wounded whale. Below them, the Soviet submersible continues to dig. Relentless, methodical, hungry. And in the dim red light of the control room, every man aboard Seawolf realizes this salvage isn't just about treasure. It's about power. the kind of power that can tilt the Cold War. June 14th, 1972. North Atlantic Trench, 312 feet below the surface. Aboard USS Seawolf. Smitty presses his headphones so hard against his ears the pads creak. His eyes are locked on the sonar screen. Con, sonar. Soviet submersible is making repeated contact with the wreck's starboard cargo bay. They're cutting hard now. Commander Halford steps closer, voice low. Describe the pattern. Smitty adjusts the controls, breath quickening. They're running a controlled sweep. Slow, deliberate. They know exactly where the bay door is. Halford doesn't flinch, but the muscle in his jaw jumps. So the rumors were true. Someone, somewhere in 1945, loaded something into that cargo hold worth hiding. Something worth lying about. And now, decades later, Soviet divers were trying to steal it. The XO, Harris, leans over the sonar console. What's the ROV using? Hydraulic cutter. Smitty shakes his head. No, too clean. Too precise. This is a thermal lance. They're burning through steel plate. Halford exhales slowly. That confirms it. They're going after a sealed compartment. He moves to the chart table and spreads a World War II-era wreck diagram. Classified, yellowed, stamped secret, beside a modern sonar printout. Cargo Bay 3, he says quietly, tapping the stern section. Supposed to be farm machinery. Bullshit. Harris nods grimly. Machinery doesn't get sealed in reinforced steel doors. Smitty turns suddenly, eyes wide. Sir, lance temperature spike. They're breaching the compartment. A low murmur spreads through the control room. Halford steps back toward the command chair, gripping it as the implications settle over him like cold seawater. A Soviet deep-sea operation running silent in international waters. A World War II wreck being torn open in the dark. A sealed compartment that only a few people alive even knew existed. If Moscow recovered whatever was inside, they could flip the balance of black-budget operations overnight, fund insurgencies, bribe governments, bankroll espionage networks with untraceable wealth. Halford leans in toward the sonar shack. Give me a clean listen. I want every sound from that ROV. Aye, sir. The room falls into tense, suffocating quiet. CHK, SHK, growling clang. Metal screams across the sonar feed. Sir, Smitty says, voice trembling, they've cracked the door. Harris closes his eyes for a moment. They're inside. Halford stares at the green sonar glow, his voice barely above a whisper. Then we have to know what they're taking. Seawolf inches forward, engines barely ticking, running on silence and fear. Smitty suddenly stiffens. Con, new sound inside the wreck. Heavy metallic sliding. He swallows. Multiple objects. Dense. Halford's eyes narrow. Bars. Smitty nods slowly, almost reluctantly. Yes, sir. Whatever they're pulling out, it's heavy as hell. A junior officer whispers. Jesus, they really found it. But Halford is already thinking ahead. If the Soviets bring that treasure to the surface, the CIA won't just be angry. They'll be desperate. Because if gold was down there, hidden for decades, what else might be? A message? A codebook? A diplomatic secret meant to stay buried forever? Halford turns to the helm. Bring us 10 meters closer. No sound spikes. I want us right under their noses without them knowing. The submarine eases deeper into the trench shadows. One wrong move, one misplaced sound, one echo, and the Soviet surface ship above would know they were here. But Halford doesn't care, because right now, under hundreds of tons of water, the Cold War isn't being fought with missiles or guns. It's being fought with a torch cutting open a corpse of a ship. And both nations know, whoever steals the sunken gold wins something far more valuable than money. June 14th, 1972. North Atlantic Trench, 326 feet below the surface. Aboard USS Seawolf. Commander Halford hovers over the sonar shack, eyes fixed on the faint scratchy returns pulsing across the display. Talk to me, Smitty. Smitty nods, adjusting the sensitivity. His voice drops to a whisper, as if the wreck itself might hear him. ROV is inside the compartment now. I'm hearing scraping. Chains. Something metallic hitting the deck. Halford and the XO exchange a look. Steel bars. Heavy crates. Something that doesn't belong in the rusted belly of a forgotten freighter. The XO mutters under his breath. They're not salvaging. They're looting. The sonar pulses. A faint rhythmic WCHRRR enters the feed. Smitty stiffens. Con. Secondary ROV detected. Smaller one. Moving around the hull. Halford's expression tightens. A second submersible. Running recon. Hunting for threats. Harris leans in. They're scanning for other vessels. Halford places a steady hand on the rail. Then we stay in the dead zone. He motions toward the diving officer. Ease us back under the thermal layer. No cavitation. No noise. The diving officer nods, hands feather-light on the controls. The sub tilts downward, slipping behind a cold water curtain where sound bends and hides. Smitty adjusts the frequency again. Secondary ROV is sweeping its sonar. Narrow beam. If we stay low, we're good. Halford's voice is barely audible. Good isn't enough. We need eyes. He turns to Lieutenant Parker, a tall officer with dark hair and a tendency to swallow fear like medicine. Prep the towed array. Slow deployment. Parker hesitates. Sir, if they're sweeping. Halford cuts him off. They're sweeping for subs running hot. Not for passive arrays crawling out like fishing line. Parker nods and disappears toward the aft compartment. Seconds later, a soft mechanical hum echoes through the hull as Seawolf's long, flexible sensor line begins to unfurl behind her, like a tail dropping into the abyss. Smitty taps his screen. Sir, the secondary ROV is climbing, moving up the hull toward the bow. Halford steps closer. If it spots us. Smitty interrupts, voice suddenly rising. New sound. Heavy object moving through water. He listens again. Sir, they're lifting something. Harris turns sharply. They've got the treasure. Smitty's fingers dance across the board. I'm hearing chain tension, pulleys, then splash. Something is rising toward the surface. Halford turns toward a junior officer on comms. Mark the ascent line. Track it. Aye, sir. On the sonar repeater, a faint streak begins climbing. Slow but unmistakable. A crate. A coffin-shaped hull with unknown cargo. Being pulled straight up into Soviet hands. Halford whispers. Whatever they just stole, it's already leaving. Then another sound hits the headphones. One that turns the room ice cold. Thud. Gay. Grind. Smitty's face drains of color. Con. That's the compartment door collapsing. They've opened the whole thing. Halford's voice lowers into a razor's edge. How much did they take? Smitty looks at him grimly. Judging by the weight on the crane line, at least a few hundred pounds. Maybe more. Halford grips the chart table. A few hundred pounds of unregistered gold would destabilize financial channels, backroom deals, covert operations. Everything the CIA and FBI work to control. Suddenly, the diving officer stiffens. Captain, wake on the surface. A vessel is repositioning. Halford snaps to attention. They're preparing for extraction. Then the sonar bleeds in with a new, terrible sound. Broom, broom. Harris mutters. Propellers. Big ones. Halford nods slowly. A Soviet salvage ship. Running dark. Breaking the waves above. He exhales through his nose. So they're taking it all the way home. He turns toward his officers, voice deadly calm. Whatever they just lifted, we're not letting it vanish into Moscow's pockets. Seawolf edges forward into the black water. Silent. Watching. Waiting. Because now, the mission wasn't just about observing. It was about intercepting a heist beneath the Cold War. June 14th, 1972. North Atlantic surface layer, 40 miles off Iceland. Aboard USS Seawolf. Con. Sonar. Smitty whispers, I've got contact on the surface. Big displacement. Slow screws. Sounds like an ocean-going salvage vessel. Hull profile matches Soviet trawler class, but she's running cold. Halford steps closer. Cold trawler means spy gear. Harris nods grimly. A wolf in fisherman's clothing. Smitty keeps listening. Sir, she's using a winch system. Hull line is under heavy strain. They're retrieving the package we tracked. Halford grips the overhead rail as Seawolf stabilizes at periscope depth. Periscope ready, the diving officer says. Halford adjusts the handles and slowly raises the mast. Water sheets off the glass. The night ocean appears black, merciless, rippling under a low moon. Spray lashes the scope. He rotates east. There, a shape, a darkened ship, barely visible except for a sliver of silhouette against the horizon. No navigation lights. No crew on deck. Just a long, skeletal crane arm extended over the water like the limb of a giant insect. Halford focuses the periscope. A cable rises from the deep, dripping black seawater. Something heavy is dangling beneath it, still submerged. Harris steps beside him. "You're looking at stolen gold, sir." Halford doesn't answer. His throat is tight. He zooms in. The crane hauls something shimmering beneath the surface. Water cascades off a rectangular crate, reinforced edges visible under the floodlight, even though the Soviets try to keep beams low. A crewman steps out with a pole, guiding the crate toward the deck. Halford lowers the scope. "Radio man," he orders quietly, "prepare a burst transmission to Norfolk. Encoded priority alpha." "No can do, sir," the radio man replies. "We transmit, we get spotted. They'll hear it." Halford knows he's right. They're blind, silent, cut off. He thinks fast. Sonar, any sign of an escort submarine? Smitty listens, adjusts filtering, listens again. Negative. Just the salvage ship and 2 ROV signatures returning to the mothership. Halford turns to his XO. They're working alone. Why? Harris frowns. Either they don't want other Soviet units knowing what they're pulling up, or someone else ordered this off the books. Halford finishes. A rogue KGB operation? A Jiryu project? A black budget recovery? It wouldn't be the first time Moscow ran deep-sea operations without telling their own navy. Suddenly, Smitty freezes. Con, secondary alarm. The ROV is climbing fast. They're bringing up another crate. Halford's head snaps toward him. They found more. Smitty's voice wavers. At least 2 more objects. Same density. Same drag. Same metallic weight. Harris mutters, 3 crates, that's no accidental cargo. Halford's voice hardens. No, someone hid something down there on purpose. He grips the chart table and whispers to himself. So what was so dangerous in 1945 that they sunk an entire ship to hide it? Behind him, the periscope shudders slightly, waves hitting the mast. On the repeater screen, the salvage ship begins rotating, preparing to secure the crates below deck. Halford turns, eyes blazing with resolve. They're taking it home. We're not letting that happen. The XO stares at him. Sir, what are you thinking? Halford answers without hesitation. We shadow that ship. We stay on it like a ghost. If they bring that gold to Soviet waters. He shakes his head. The Cold War gets a hell of a lot colder. The Seawolf angles forward, sliding beneath the waves, silent, invisible, and now hunting. Not for enemies, not for submarines, but for stolen treasure rising out of a forgotten grave. June 15th, 1972. North Atlantic Surface Shadow Zone. 2:12 a.m. aboard USS Seawolf. Commander Halford stands over the navigation table, one hand anchored on the edge, the other tapping a pencil in a slow rhythm. "Helm, keep us 50 yards off her stern. No closer. Match her speed exactly." "Aye, sir." Making turns for 3 knots. The submarine hums, adjusting. The screws whisper as they settle into cadence with the Soviet intruder above. In sonar, Smitty listens hard, jaw clenched. Con, salvage ship maintaining steady bearing. Winches locked. Crane arms folding in. They're securing the crates. Halford mutters. They don't want anyone seeing what they pulled up. The XO, Harris, leans over the chart. They'll head east toward the WWII gap. If they reach Murmansk with those crates, we lose them forever. Halford doesn't respond. He already knows. The Cold War is built on shadows. Silent operations, deniable salvage missions, undersea chess. But gold? Gold is something else. Gold is leverage. Gold buys spies, silence, governments, coups. And if the crates hold documents or relics buried since 1945, the fallout could be far worse. A junior officer breaks the silence. "Sir, what exactly are we trying to confirm?" Are we sure it's gold? Halford shakes his head slowly. That's the problem. We're not sure it's just gold. The officer swallows hard. Smitty suddenly stiffens. Con, new sound on the hull of the wreck. Something else is being moved inside. Halford frowns. They went back. Yes, sir, Smitty confirms. ROV number 2 is returning to the compartment. Hydraulic arms extended. They're not done. Harris mutters, Jesus, how much did the ship take down? Halford steps closer to the sonar shack. Any screw noise underwater? Another sub. Smitty shakes his head. No contact. Just the salvage vessel and those ROVs. The diving officer calls out from his station. Depth holding steady. We're right under their blind spot. Halford's voice drops, barely above a whisper. That's exactly where we stay. Minutes crawl by like hours. The fog thickens above, sound muffles, and the salvage ship's shadow on sonar becomes smeared. Faint but steady, like a heartbeat fading into the mist. The radio man approaches. Captain, if we're going to send a burst to Norfolk, now's the last window. Atmospherics are good. After this fog rolls in deeper, the signal may scatter. Halford thinks. Sending a burst risk detection. Not sending it risks the Soviet Union slipping away with something irreplaceable. He makes his decision. Negative. We stay dark. Harris looks at him sharply. Sir, the CIA will want an update. And they'll get one, Halford says. But not at the cost of giving our position away. If the Soviets detect Seawolf, this becomes a confrontation. And a confrontation becomes an incident. And an incident becomes a crisis. Halford breathes out, steady and slow. Sonar, status on the ROV? Smitty swallows hard. Con, ROV is rising again. Fast. Heavy drag. Another crate. Halford closes his eyes. So it wasn't one. Or three. It was more. Harris leans in. Sir, at what point do we consider that whatever was sunk down, there wasn't just gold? What if it was intelligence cargo? Diplomatic files? Something worth burying under 300 feet of water. Halford opens his eyes. That's why we're following them. He moves to periscope depth again. Fog swirls past the lens when the periscope breaks the surface, cold, white, silent. But through the haze, a faint light glows aboard the Soviet ship. A deck lamp, a silhouette, a crane arm lowering another dripping crate onto the deck. Halford lowers the scope slowly. They know exactly what they're taking, and they're in a damn hurry. He turns to his crew. We stick to them like glue. If they speed up, we speed up. If they dive, we dive. If they run, he stares at the dark water ahead. We chase. The Seawolf angles forward beneath the waves, a silent predator stalking a thief in the night. Above, the Soviet ship gains speed, its engines waking, its silhouette shifting through fog. Whatever they stole from the deep, they're desperate to get a home. And the Seawolf is the only thing standing between the Soviet Union and a secret buried since the end of World War II. June 15, 1972. North Atlantic, approaching the WWII gap. Aboard USS Seawolf. Commander Halford stands in the center of the control room, gripping the overhead pipe as the deck tilts under his boots. They're heading straight for the gap, he says. This is about to get crowded. The WWII gap, Greenland, Iceland, United Kingdom. The choke point of the North Atlantic. A funnel of sonar nets, NATO patrols, Soviet subs, and Cold War paranoia. If the Soviets pass through that funnel unnoticed with whatever they pulled from the wreck, America loses the treasure forever. The diving officer adjusts trim. Holding depth at 210 feet, sir. Quiet as we can go. Smitty calls out from sonar. Con, salvage ship increasing speed. Now making 14 knots. Hammering their screws. Harris frowns. They don't care about noise anymore. Halford nods. They think they're far enough ahead of anyone who might be watching. Smitty's voice tightens. They're wrong. The Seawolf creeps beneath the ship like a shark pacing a wounded seal. Its hull hums with controlled power, reactors throttled low to keep noise minimal. But the thrill of the chase creeps through the room, electric and dangerous. Sir, the navigator calls out, the gap sonar net begins in 30 miles. If they maintain course, they'll hit the first barrier line at dawn. Halford considers this, jaw tight. If the Soviets try to slip through the net quietly, it'll be suspicious. If they call for clearance, it'll raise questions. If they run silent, it'll scream secret operation. Harris leans in, whispering, "What if they got a submarine waiting on the other side?" Halford shakes his head. No screw noise. No cavitation signatures. They're alone. Then what's their plan? That's what we're here to find out. Suddenly the sonar shack goes dead quiet. Smitty slowly raises a hand. Contact shift. New noise. Faint. Coming from the salvage ship's starboard side. Halford turns sharply. What kind of noise? Smitty adjusts the gain. A small motor. No props. Just a hum. Sir, I think. He freezes. They're launching a second vessel. Halford's breath goes cold. A submersible? No, sir. Smitty swallows. Something bigger. Something manned. Harris curses under his breath. A mini-sub. Halford slams a hand on the chart table. Damn, that meant one thing. The crates being hoisted aboard the salvage vessel weren't the only prize. The Soviets were taking something else from the wreck. Something they didn't want to surface. Something they needed a submarine for. Halford's voice drops to a whisper. Track that mini-sub. Now. Smitty's hands fly over the console. Mini-sub bearing 080, descending. Slow control dive. Heading southeast. Harris's eyes widen. They're splitting their hull. So they expect to be chased, Halford mutters. Or boarded. He steps back, thinking fast. The salvage ship was bait. The mini-sub was the insurance policy. And the prize, the true treasure, was not gold. Halford looks up, voice razor-sharp. Elm, bring us around. New course 080. Make turns for 5 knots. Quiet as death. We stay on that mini-sub. Aye, sir. The Seawolf angles away from the salvage ship, slipping back into deeper darkness. Behind them, the Soviet surface vessel keeps plowing east. Loud, obvious, sacrificial. Ahead of them, the mini-sub sinks silently toward the continental shelf, running slow and cold. Smitty tracks it carefully. Sir, mini-sub is maintaining depth at 250. Smooth movement. They know exactly where they're going. Halford nods, eyes locked on the chart. Of course they do, because whatever they're carrying, he taps the map. It's too valuable to risk on the surface. The Seawolf tightens the chase. A predator following a thief with something priceless hidden in its steel belly. June 15th, 1972. Mid-Atlantic continental shelf, 265 feet below. Aboard USS Seawolf. Commander Halford leans over Smitty's shoulder as the sonar screen pulses with faint returns. What's that noise? He asks. Smitty tilts his head, listening hard. I got rhythmic scrape and clunk. Something shifting inside the mini-sub. Halford narrows his eyes. Cargo. Harris crosses his arms. Or equipment they don't want anyone seeing. No one speaks for a long moment. The mini-sub maintains a slow, deliberate course. 2 knots, hugging a narrow canyon carved into the seabed. Almost like it's following a marked path. Halford frowns at the chart. That trench isn't on navigational maps. Harris replies quietly. But the Soviets know it. The diving officer adjusts trim, keeping Seawolf perfectly balanced. Sir, they're descending again. 280 feet. No propulsion spikes. Control drop. Smitty suddenly stiffens. Metallic impact. Something inside the mini-sub just fell. Halford turned sharply. What was it? Dense. Heavy. Sir, that sounded like a bar dropping against steel. Harris's voice cuts in. Gold bars don't shift like that unless they're loose. Halford clenches his jaw. Why the hell are they moving gold through a mini-sub at depth? This wasn't transport. This was hiding. The Seawolf keeps tailing silently. The mini-sub flattens its course and begins creeping east again, deeper into the canyon. Halford studies the chart table, tracing the underwater ravine with a finger. This canyon leads nowhere strategic. No Soviet territorial waters. They're not escaping. Harris leans closer. Then what are they doing? Smitty answers without looking up. They're going to ground, sir. Halford's eyes widen. Hide the cargo, or transfer it. To who? Smitty adjusts the filter, and suddenly a new sound crackles through his headset. He freezes. New contact. Halford steps in behind him. Where? Bearing 044. Extremely faint. Possible hull resonance. Maybe cavitation suppressed? It's small. Quiet. Harris whispers. A second mini-sub? No, Smitty says, breath-catching. Sir, this signature matches a swimmer delivery vehicle. Navy SEAL style. Human-operated. Halford raises an eyebrow. Since when do the Soviets use SDVs in open ocean? Smitty listens again. Sir, it's not Soviet. Halford straightens. Not Soviet. Not civilian. No records of any NATO SDV operations in this area. Then who? He turns slowly toward the map. Unless the crate wasn't Soviet property either. Unless this was a three-way race without anyone admitting it. Harris whispers the thought aloud. Sir, what if the Soviets weren't the first ones here? Halford's breathing stops for half a second. A wreck for 1945. A sealed compartment. Multiple crates. A sudden Soviet salvage op. A mini-sub splitting off with their real prize. And now, someone else in the water coming to intercept it. Halford moves with sudden urgency. Helm, bring us 10 meters shallower. Keep our profile low. The diving officer, startled, complies. The Seawolf rises slightly, giving sonar a better angle. Smitty pushes the gain. The faint signature sharpens. 2 human heartbeats. Battery hum. Microprop. Smitty's voice cracks. Swimmer vehicle is approaching the Soviet mini-sub. Halford grips the chair. Jesus Christ, someone's boarding them underwater. Harris blurts. That's impossible. No one boards a moving mini-sub at depth. Halford corrects him quietly. Not unless they're elite divers. And trained for it. The sonar ping cuts through again, a tiny tap against metal. Smitty's eyes go wide. They're attaching something magnetic. Tools. They're latching on. Halford's mind races. A rogue NATO unit? A CIA black op? A third-party mercenary team? Or something worse? Someone trying to steal the treasure from the thieves. The control room falls silent. Every man on Seawolf feels the same sick realization. They're not tailing one enemy. They're in the middle of a 3-sided undersea heist. And nobody knows who's holding the winning hand. June 15th, 1972. Mid-Atlantic Trench Ridge, 272 feet below. Aboard USS Seawolf. In sonar, the room goes dead still. Smitty's voice trembles through the headset. Swimmer vehicle is now right up against the Soviet mini-sub. Tools in motion. Tap sound continue. They're opening something. Halford's eyes narrow. They're not attacking. They're boarding. The XO shakes his head. This is insane. Nobody boards underwater like that. Pressure, visibility, current. Halford cuts him off. That's not a demolition team. That's a recovery team. Smitty suddenly flinches. Sir, small metallic click. Sounds like clamps locking. They've latched onto the mini-sub's hatch seam. Harris stares at the sonar repeater. They're trying to force the hatch. At depth. That'll flood both vessels. No, Halford says calmly. If they had the gear for a hard dock underwater, it won't flood. He steps back, mind racing. Only one country used saturation divers and magnetic clamp docks in 1972, and it wasn't the Soviets. Halford whispers the conclusion no one wants to say. Could be British, or French, or even one of ours. The room holds its breath. Smitty continues, voice shaking with adrenaline. I'm hearing ratchets. Small power tools. They're loosening bolts externally. Halford frowns. On a mini-sub at 270 feet? That's suicidal. Harris mutters. Unless they have a full pressure chamber inside the SDV. The divers outside the Soviet vessel are working fast, too fast. Not sabotage, not espionage. This is theft. The USA is watching someone hijack a Soviet heist in real time. Halford grips the charred edge hard, enough his knuckles go bone white. What's the Soviet mini-sub doing? Any maneuvering? Smitty shakes his head. Negative. They're holding depth. Probably don't know they're being boarded. The divers are on the blind underside. Halford curses under his breath. Smart. Suicidal, but smart. He leans close to Smitty. What do you hear now? Smitty listens, squinting. Hatchwell movement. Slow. Careful. The divers, they're opening the outer lock. Harris steps forward. Sir, if they breach the internal hatch, it'll set off alarms. Halford shakes his head. Maybe not. Depends if the Soviets disabled internal sensors during salvage. The room falls silent again. Then, thunk. A deep, hollow sound reverberates through sonar. Smitty jerks upright. Con. Outer hatch opened. Divers are inside the Soviet mini-sub. The entire control room freezes. Inside, boarding an enemy submersible. At depth, during a covert mission. Halford whispers. No one on Earth is supposed to be able to do that. Smitty's voice cracks. Movement inside the mini-sub just changed. Weight shifting. Tools dropped. This is chaos. Harris leans in toward Halford. Sir, the Soviets know. A rising metallic screech pulses through sonar. A sound like metal grinding against metal in panic. Smitty shouts. Con, mini-sub increasing speed. Erratic heading. They're trying to shake the divers. Halford snaps to the helm. Helm, keep distance. Don't let them crash into us. Aye, sir. The mini-sub jerks hard to starboard, thrashing in the canyon like a hooked fish. The diver vehicle clings to its hull, still locked on. Smitty yells. Con, more interior movement. Something heavy being dragged. Halford's blood runs cold. The crate. They're stealing the crate, Harris whispers. A second sonar pulse rings out. Smitty stares at the screen. Con, swimmer vehicle just detached. Halford stiffens. They got it. They got it. The tiny diver craft kicks its micro-propellers and darts down the trench at incredible speed, fleeing with whatever was inside the compartment. Smitty whispers. Con, the Soviet mini-sub is giving chase. Halford steps into the center of the room, voice firm. We follow the divers. Harris snaps his head toward him. Sir, that's not protocol. It's a mission now, Halford says. Whatever was worth sinking a ship in 1945, worth stealing in 1972, and worth boarding a Soviet mini-sub underwater to grab. He stares at the canyon ahead. Is worth us risking everything. Seawolf angles downward, reactors humming like a heartbeat, chasing ghosts in the dark. Because now the stakes were clear. 3 nations were fighting over something buried for decades. And only one would reach daylight with the truth. June 15, 1972. North Atlantic continental shelf drop-off, 298 feet below. Aboard USS Seawolf. Commander Halford stands braced in the control room, boots planted, knuckles white around the rail. Helm, maintain pursuit course. Keep us 20 yards aft, 40 above. Aye, sir. Maneuvering. In sonar, Smitty works faster than Halford has ever seen. Sweat beads on his forehead despite the freezing air. Con, SDV is accelerating, sir. Small motor, but they're pushing it to the limit. The swimmer delivery vehicle darts through the trench like a bullet, its signature tiny but steady. 2 human heartbeats still faintly ping against the hydrophones. Harris leans in. They're running for a rendezvous. Halford nods grimly. Or a hiding spot. Behind them, the Soviet mini-sub screeches through the water, screws whining in a desperate chase. It slams into canyon walls, scraping metal, shedding flakes of paint into the current. Smitty calls out. Con, mini-sub cavitation rising. They're panicking. Halford swallows. Let them panic. We're not after them anymore. The sonar room goes quiet. Then, SKRKKK, SKKK, KRRRKKK. A jagged pulse cuts through the speakers. Smitty stiffens, eyes widening. Con, SDV is changing depth rapidly. They're diving. Hard. Halford snaps his head around. Dive officer. Match them. Now. The Seawolf angles downward sharply. The deck tilts. Mugslide. Clipboards rattle. Someone curses under their breath. Depth passing 310, the diving officer calls. Smitty pinches the headphones. Con, the SDV is heading for the shelf edge. Halford's voice drops like a stone. They're going over the side? Harris mutters. That drop-off is 800 feet. Halford jaw tightens. They won't survive a free dive. Not in that tin can. Smitty raises a trembling hand. Con, there's something else. Halford turns, breath held. What? Smitty adjusts the gain, filters, listens. There's another sound. Big. Below the trench floor. Halford moves to the display. What kind of big? Smitty hesitates. Of the hull. Harris's eyebrows shoot up. A submarine? That deep? Smitty shakes his head violently. No, sir. Not active. No screws. No reactor hum. It's sitting on the bottom. Halford goes silent. A second wreck? Something larger? A World War II relic lost deeper than any record? The trench widens on sonar. Smitty's voice cracks. Con, it's huge. Halford mind races. The SDV wasn't escaping. It was returning to something. Harris whispers, Dear God, they're not stealing the crate for themselves. Halford finishes the sentence for him. They're delivering it to another sub. A dead one. A sleeper. A hidden vault. Smitty inhales sharply. SDV is slowing, leveling off, approaching the object. Halford stares at the sonar. Son, describe it. Smitty lowers the gain one more notch. The image sharpens. Metal. Riveted plates. Collapse bow. Massive superstructure. It's not Soviet, Smitty whispers. Halford's heart thumps. He stepped closer. What is it? Smitty breathes the word like a ghost escaping. German. The room freezes. Halford's pulse spikes. Are you telling me there's a German submarine down there? Smitty nods shakily. Yes, sir. World War II design. But bigger than a standard U-boat. Much bigger. Halford grips the console. A secret U-boat? Never recorded. Never found. Resting at 800 feet. Waiting for a delivery. Harris whispers. What the hell were they hiding down here? Smitty suddenly gasps. Con. SDV has docked with the hull. They're boarding the wreck. Halford stares into the black water ahead. A Soviet team stole gold from a World War II wreck. A mystery SDV stole it from them. Now, they're carrying it to a sunken German submarine. A submarine that should not exist. Halford whispers. Helm, bring us closer. Slow and quiet. Because whatever was down there had survived the war, the ocean, and time itself. And it was still waiting. June 15th, 1972. Atlantic abyssal shelf, 812 feet below. Aboard USS Seawolf. Red emergency lamps wash over the control room. The air seems thinner. Men breathing softer, slower, as if afraid the ocean might hear them. Smitty adjusts the sonar dial, his voice barely a breath. Contact fixed. Bearing steady. Sir, it's massive. Halford steps closer, steady as bedrock. How massive? A hell of a lot bigger than any U-boat that ever saw a blueprint. The room goes dead silent. Halford grips the console. Give me dimensions. Smitty's fingers tremble over the gain. Best reading, 800 feet long. Harris jerks around. That's impossible. Type 9 boats were nowhere near that size. Sir, Smitty swallows. This isn't a Type 9. The Seawolf drifts out of the trench and into the abyssal shelf, its spotlights off, running blind, running silent. The darkness now takes on shape. A contour, a shadow, a hull, bigger than any World War II submarine ever built. Hidden, buried by time and pressure. Halford whispers, What am I looking at? Smitty doesn't answer. He can't. So the XO does. This is a factory sub, Harris says. Or a transport, not a combat boat. Halford lifts his binoculars toward the viewing scope. Even through the pitch black, the faintest outline emerges as the Seawolf glides past. A long, sloping bow, double-pressure hull, collapsed forward section, a conning tower twice the size of a normal U-boat. External cargo racks fused in rust. Harris murmurs. The Nazis were experimenting with megaboats in '44, but none were confirmed built. Halford finishes the thought. Unless they built one in secret and sank it in secret. Smitty's headset crackles. Con. SDV has attached to the forward hatch. 2 divers entering the wreck now. Halford's eyes narrow. They know exactly what they're doing. Harris nods, unsettled. No fumbling. No hesitation. Whoever they are, they trained for this specific hull. The captain turns back to Smitty. Any Soviet movement? Smitty adjusts the dial. Yes, sir. Minisub is still following the SDV fast. They're angry. Cavitation rising. They're pushing limits. Halford gives a grim smile. Soviets stole from our wreck. Someone stole from them. Now, they're chasing the thief. He glances toward the sonar repeater. And we're chasing all of them. Suddenly, Smitty stiffens. Con. Interior noises inside the German sub. Movement. Not structural settling. Heavy scraping, metal sliding. Halford leans close. How the hell are they moving anything inside a pressure corpse like that? They're in the forward cargo bay, Smitty replies. Sounds like they're dragging something. Harris whispers, what the hell did the Nazis hide in a submarine this big? Smitty adjusts the gain and freezes. Sir, there's more. Halford stands perfectly still. What do you hear? A third heartbeat. Halford blinks. What? Smitty clears his throat, eyes wide. 3 heartbeats, sir. 2 divers, and someone else inside the hull. A chill sweeps the room. Harris shakes his head. No, impossible. That sub's been down here since 45. Smitty stares at the screen. No, sir. Not alive, but inside. Maybe trapped or preparing something. Halford's stomach twists with instinct. What are the Soviets doing? Smitty listens. They're coming in hot. Mini-sub dropping fast. They'll intercept the SDV at the German wreck in under 2 minutes. Halford walks to the command chair, planting his boot on the rung. Helm, take us to 900 feet. Slow. Side-scan them. Aye, sir. As the Seawolf dips lower, the spotlights catch the faintest glint. A steel plate torn open in the Megaboat's hull. Halford whispers, Jesus, they cut into her already. Harris looks up sharply. The SDV divers didn't break that open. No, Halford says, but someone did. The Seawolf glides closer. The monstrous wreck looms like the skeleton of a sea god. Inside the torn section, darkness yawns. Deep, inviting, full of things that should never have survived. Smitty's headphones rattle. Con, Soviet mini-sub approaching fast. Halford nods once. All right. He exhales. We stay hidden. We watch this play out. He stares into the black mouth of the German submarine. Because the only thing more terrifying than a World War II megaboat is the idea that something inside it has been waiting 27 years to be found. June 15th, 1972. Abyssal shelf of the North Atlantic, 900 feet below. Aboard USS Seawolf. Ahead of them, illuminated only by faint reflections off the instruments, lies the monstrous shadow of the sunken German submarine, its torn hull gaping like a colossal wound. Through the darkest part of that opening, Seawolf's passive sonar catches every movement. Smitty's voice is barely audible. Con, SDV divers have moved into the forward cargo bay. I'm hearing tools, ratchets, cutting wheels. Harris frowns. They're opening something inside the megaboat. Halford nods slowly. A vault. The XO blinks. A vault? On a submarine? Halford taps the World War II wreck diagram pinned beside the modern sonar map. Some Nazi subs carried U-boat treasure crates. Others carried scientists. A few carried stolen art. But megaboat this size. He points at the massive outline. This wasn't transporting. This was hiding. Smitty suddenly stiffens. Con. Soviet mini-sub closing fast. Bearing 184. 100 yards and descending. Halford grips the rail. Do they see the SDV? No, sir, Smitty whispers. They're coming in blind. The canyon walls are blocking their sonar. Harris mutters. They're about to stumble into each other. The Seawolf drifts closer to the wreck. The pressure is a living presence now, pressing into every bolt, every joint. Men breathe slowly, as if a single loud inhalation might crack the hull. Halford peers through the periscope's night vision mode. No external light, just shape, shadow, and contrast. The German submarine fills his view. The conning tower is crushed. The bow is torn open. Rust blooms everywhere. But one thing stands out. The design isn't like any U-boat he's seen. Double hull. Oversized pressure compartments. No deck guns. No torpedo tubes visible. A transport. Or a vault. Harris whispers. Sir, if the divers are opening something in that cargo bay. Halford finishes the thought. Then the Soviets were after the wrong ship. Smitty slaps the console lightly. Con. SDV divers have opened an inner container. Something large just shifted. Halford turns sharply. What do you hear? Smitty closes his eyes. Wooden crate, reinforced with steel brackets. Heavy, being pulled across metal. Harris's breathing shakes. A Nazi vault at 800 feet. The implications hit them all at once. This wasn't gold. This was something classified, even during the war. Halford whispers. What the hell did Germany sink on purpose? Suddenly, crank, KRR and an NKKK thud. A deafening screech pulses through sonar. Smitty jumps in his seat. Con. Mini-sub just collided with the hull. They hit the German wreck head-on. Halford snaps to the helm. Emergency reverse. Quiet. Don't let them hear us. The Seawolf glides backward into shadow. The Soviet mini-sub scrapes along the Megaboat's starboard side, shedding paint, rattling bolts loose. Its captain is panicked, pushing the machine too hard. Harris whispers. They know they're being robbed. Smitty nods. They're searching the wreck. Suddenly the sonar fills with chaotic echoes. Thumps. Scrapes. Metal impacts. Con. Soviets have entered the wreck through the forward breach. Smitty yells. Halford's blood runs cold. Are they armed? Smitty listens, then nods slowly. Footsteps. Boots on metal. 2, 3, maybe 4 men. Weapons clinking. Sir, they came prepared. Halford folds his arms. And now everyone's meeting inside a Nazi submarine at 900 feet. Inside the wreck, the divers and Soviet boarders are separated by only a few bulkheads and a rust-eaten pressure compartment. The sonar captures every nuance, filtered through water and steel. Smitty whispers. Someone just opened the crate. Halford's jaw tightens. What's inside? I hear cloth. Something unwrapped. Something metallic touching air. Harris leans in. What kind of metal? Smitty frowns. Not bars. Not coins. Something shaped. Halford speaks quietly, almost afraid of the answer. Smitty, does it sound hollow? Smitty listens. Partially. Metal frame. Light surface. Something rigid, not heavy. Halford looks up in slow disbelief. A device. Harris stares at him. What kind of device? Halford shakes his head. I don't know. But the Nazis didn't sink gold in a custom megaboat. They sank something they didn't want the Allies, or the Soviets, to find. Suddenly, bang, a muffled explosion rattles the German hull. Smitty shouts. Con, gunfire inside the wreck. Halford's voice goes cold. It started. 2 sides fighting over a Nazi vault. At 900 feet, inside a submarine tomb. And the Seawolf is the only witness. June 15th, 1972. Abyssal shelf dead zone, 905 feet below. Aboard USS Seawolf. Smitty slams both palms on the console. Con. Confirmed weapons discharge inside the wreck. Semi-auto fire. Short bursts. The control room turns into a statue garden. Harris stares at the sonar repeater. They're fighting inside a German submarine, 900 feet down. Halford's face stays flat, but his eyes darken. This just went from salvage to murder. Inside the wreck, sonar picks up more. Footsteps pounding on metal. Breathing. Shouting, muffled by steel and seawater. The heavy drag of a crate. Smitty's hands fly across the controls. Con. Divers are moving fast. They're dragging the crate toward the breach opening. Halford's voice cuts in. Are the Soviets following? Smitty nods. Yes, sir. Multiple signatures. Heavy boots. Fast moving. They're right behind the divers. Halford mutters. Christ, they're going to kill each other in a coffin. Harris points to the sonar plot. SDV is still latched outside the hull. If the divers reach it, they'll escape with the device, Halford says. Across the room, the radio man whispers. Sir, do we intervene? Halford doesn't answer immediately. He stares at the torn hull on the scope. A massive German submarine, hidden since 1945, designed for something the world was never meant to see. And now, 2 Cold War powers and a rogue third team were fighting over what lay inside. Sonar, Halford says at last. Give me every heartbeat in that hull. Smitty nods, adjusts gain, then freezes. Con, the crate's weight just changed. Halford turns slowly. What? Smitty listens again, puzzled. They're pulling something out of the crate. The XO frowns. Not taking the whole box. No, sir. Just the contents. Halford's breath grows tight. They knew exactly what they wanted. Smitty flinches as another metallic clatter echoes. They just dropped the crate lid. They're removing something metallic. Maybe cylindrical. Maybe... He stops. Halford steps closer. Finish that sentence. Smitty forces himself to say it. Sir, it sounds like a capsule. Harris's face drains. A warhead? Halford shakes his head. No. Too light. Too small. Smitty adjusts again. There's something else inside the capsule. Something shifting. Loose. Papers? A mechanism. Halford grips the rail. A codebook? Microfilm? Prototype plans? Smitty suddenly jerks upright. Con. Soviet boarders are 5 meters behind the divers. They're shouting. Running. Shots fired again. More muffled bangs echo. Smitty winces. One diver down. Heartbeat fading. The others are dragging the capsule. Harris mutters, Jesus, they're dying over Nazi secrets. Suddenly, the Soviet mini-sub slams into the wreck again. Krong. The entire seafloor shudders. Halford snaps his head toward the helm. Helm, pull us 3 degrees up, Bubble. Don't get caught in their wash. Aye, sir. The Seawolf rises slightly, slipping into a quieter pocket of water. Smitty calls out. Con, divers reach the breach. They're exiting the wreck. Halford's pulse spikes. And the Soviets? Right behind them. On the scope, Halford sees faint silhouettes emerging from the Megaboat's torn hull, a cloud of disturbed silt trailing behind them. 2 diver forms finning hard toward the SDV. Smitty narrates in a rushed whisper. Capsule clutched between them, swimming fast. Halford steps toward the periscope, watching ghost shadows move. Harris whispers, if the Soviets catch them outside, they'll shoot them in the open water. Halford answers softly, no bullets at 900 feet. Pressure crushes everything. Smitty stiffens. Con. Soviet mini-sub is turning its lights on. Halford freezes. They're illuminating the wreck. No, sir. The divers. Floodlights blast through the trench, blinding the SDV team. Harris whispers. They're exposed. Smitty's voice tightens. Con. Soviets are opening their external hatch. Halford breathes the conclusion. They're going to capture them. The divers kick hard toward the SDV. The Soviet mini-sub closes in behind them like a steel predator. Stored treasure. A capsule. A sunken Nazi megaboat. 2 divers. And an approaching Soviet kill team. Halford steps slowly back, eyes fixed on the displays. Prepare to maneuver, he says quietly. Because for the first time since this nightmare began, he may be forced to break the rules. June 15th, 1972. North Atlantic abyssal shelf, 910 feet below. Aboard USS Seawolf. The Soviet mini-sub's floodlights burn through the abyss, washing the trench in a ghostly white glow. In that halo, 2 divers kick desperately toward their SDV, a small cylindrical capsule clutched between them. Behind them, the Soviet mini-sub roars forward, engines whining under pressure. Smitty's voice shakes through the sonar shack. Con. Mini-sub closing at 6 knots. Too fast. Too close. Halford grabs the rail, eyes narrowing. They're going to ram them. Harris straightens sharply. Sir, we can't let a Soviet vessel murder 2 divers in front of us. Halford's reply is cold, steady. We're a ghost. We do not exist. But Halford cuts him off. Our job is observation. Intervention risks war. The XO's jaw tightens, but he says nothing. Inside sonar, the echoes grow sharper. KRRN and K, word drag. Smitty calls out rapidly. Con, divers latched onto the SDV. They're sealing the capsule. They're prepping for detach. Halford mutters. Then hurry, boys, before the Russians crush you. The Soviet mini-sub dives lower, trying to wedge itself between the SDV and the wreck. It's reckless. Dangerous. The kind of maneuver a captain only attempts when he's desperate or furious. Harris whispers. They're not capturing. They're eliminating. Halford nods once. Because whatever is in that capsule is more valuable than prisoners. The Seawolf shudders slightly as the pressure outside rises. Suddenly, Smitty jerks upright in his chair. SDV detached. They're peeling away from the wreck. Halford snaps to helm. Track their vector. Aye, sir. On the sonar repeater, the SDV darts away, hugging the canyon wall with expert precision. The divers inside must be veterans. No hesitation, no wasted motion. But the Soviets aren't far behind. Smitty yells. Mini-sub accelerating. Cavitation rising. They'll overtake the SDV in 20 seconds. Harris slams his fist against the rail. They're not going to make it. Halford exhales sharply through his nose. Sonar. Confirm no other vessels in the trench? No, sir, Smitty replies. We're alone down here. Alone in the black. Alone with a Nazi megaboat, a stolen capsule, 2 rogue divers, and a Soviet submergence craft turning itself into a weapon. The Soviet mini-sub closes the distance, its lights slicing through the dark like knives. Halford whispers. They're lining up to strike. Smitty shouts. SDV making emergency ascent. Halford's eyes widen. No, too fast. The SDV pitches upward and shoots toward higher water. Harris mutters. They're risking decompression and Russian torpedoes. Halford finishes. Captain, Smitty cries suddenly. Mini-sub launching external drone. Halford spins. A drone? Yes, sir. Small, prop-driven. Fast. It's heading straight for the SDV. Harris breathes. They want the capsule, not the divers. Halford bites down on a curse. The drone streaks upward, chasing the SDV in a spiraling ascent. Its proper winds through sonar like a hornet trapped inside a tin can. Smitty calls. Impact imminent. Halford's grip loosens. Helm. Harris turns toward him. Sir, are you saying? Halford pauses. 1 beat. 2 beats. Then, helm, take us between them. The entire room freezes. The diving officer speaks carefully. Captain, that's direct intervention. Halford's voice is a low growl. I'm aware. We'll reveal our presence. Halford's eyes stay fixed on the sonar repeater. If that drone reaches the SDV, the capsule is gone. And so is every answer we've been chasing. Harris whispers. Sir, this could spark a Cold War incident. Halford nods slowly. Then let's make damn sure we don't get caught. He takes a single step forward. Hell now. Aye, sir. The Seawolf pivots hard, reactors humming with suppressed fury. Her bow cuts into the trench like a black spear. Smitty cries out. Closing fast. 10 meters. 5. 2. Contact imminent. The Seawolf surges between the Soviet drone and the fleeing SDV. A silent guardian rising from the abyss. The drone slams into Seawolf's hull with a metallic clang. Sparks flash in the dark water. The drone crumples. The SDV escapes upward. Halford whispers. Good luck, whoever the hell you are. Because the hardest part is still ahead. June 15th, 1972. North Atlantic Abyssal Shelf Ascent Corridor, 720 feet below. Aboard USS Seawolf. Alarms blink red. Crewmen hold their breath. The submarine's heartbeat slows. Halford grips the console. Damage report. The engineer shouts back. No breaches, sir. Hull integrity holding. Scrape damage only. Halford exhales a slow breath. Good. They'd risk detection, but not destruction. Smitty's voice rises from sonar, urgent and trembling. SDV has cleared 900 feet and is rising. They're climbing fast, too fast. Harris peers over Smitty's shoulder. They're going for the surface? Looks that way, Smitty says. Rate of ascent, 15 feet per second. Halford grimaces. They're risking the bends. Desperate. What kind of capsule forces divers to risk their lives like that? What was so important the Soviets were willing to kill for it? And why was it hidden inside a Nazi megaboat on the seafloor? The questions tighten like a vice around Halford's skull. Behind them, the Soviet mini-sub regains balance. Its screws spiral up the trench. Lights flicker angrily in the dark. Smitty mutters, They're coming after the SDV again. Halford nods. Track them both. Smitty listens intently. SDV at 680, 660, still climbing. Mini-sub at 720, trailing behind, closing. Harris clenches his jaw. They'll catch them at 500 feet. Not if they hit the thermocline first, Halford says. The SDV shoots upward like a fleeing ghost, breaching layers of warm and cold water where sonar bends and sound dies. But the Soviet mini-sub is hunting with rage, and rage is loud. Smitty's eyes widen. New contact. Halford straightens. What? A large vessel above the thermocline. Waiting. Stationary. Halford stares at him. Another Soviet ship? Smitty shakes his head. No screw signature. No engine hum. It's floating. Silent. Halford frowns. A dead ship. Harris thinks for a moment. Or someone running ultra-quiet. Halford's voice sharpens. Give me size. Smitty tunes the channel. About 100 feet long. Halford's breath catches. Not a trawler. No, sir. Smitty adjusts again. It's shaped like a pleasure craft. Harris raises an eyebrow. Oh, hell, don't tell me. Halford finishes quietly. The SDV has a rendezvous point. A surface-level exfiltration. Perfectly timed. Perfectly placed. Perfectly quiet. And it wasn't Soviet. It wasn't NATO. It was private. Goddamn mercenaries, Harris mutters. Smitty chokes on his next words. SDV is locking onto the underside of the vessel. They're docking. Halford freezes. They're transferring the capsule. Smitty listens. Yes, sir. Metallic clicks. They're passing it up through the hull. Halford's stomach drops. The yacht isn't here for sightseeing, Harris mutters. They planned this for years. Halford nods grimly. A Nazi megaboat. Soviet salvage. Rogue divers. And now a private exfiltration vessel. The SDV disengages. SDV descending again. Smitty shouts. Empty. Halford whispers. They handed it off, and now they're ditching. In sonar, the Soviet mini-sub blazes upward, propellers screaming as it chases the SDV. Not realizing the treasure has already changed hands. Harris mutters. Russians are chasing the wrong ghost. Halford nods. So let's chase the right one. He steps into the center of the room. Elm, bring us up. Quiet and slow. Follow that yacht. The officer hesitates. Captain, that's breach of orders. We're leaving our patrol zone. Halford's voice is ice. We're the only ones who know what just happened down there. He leans forward. And we're not losing the truth to a boat full of mercenaries. The Seawolf rises, silent as a whisper, cutting upward through the abyss toward the one vessel that now holds the answers. The Soviet mini-sub shoots past them in the darkness, chasing the empty SDV. Blind, angry, very loud. But the Seawolf? She's hunting the real prize. The capsule. And whatever nightmare is sealed inside it. June 15th, 1972. North Atlantic upper thermocline, 420 feet below. Aboard USS Seawolf. Inside the control room, the tension is suffocating. Smitty leans over his console, headphones pressed tight. Surface contact holding position. Still no engine noise. Silent as a tomb. Halford steps closer. How far above us? 370 feet, sir. Harris frowns. Running that silent, they're hiding from someone. Halford fixes his eyes on the sonar repeater. They're hiding from the Soviets. And from anyone else who might be watching. The Seawolf rises another 10 feet. The shape above becomes clearer. Sleek hull lines, low acoustic signature. No fishing gear, no cargo containers. A ghost ship. Smitty whispers. Definite yacht profile. But modified. Reinforced keel. Unusually quiet propeller design. Halford nods slowly. Not a pleasure craft. A special operations platform. Harris mutters. Built to vanish between nations. Halford replies. Built to steal. Suddenly Smitty tenses. Movement inside the yacht's hull. Heavy footsteps. Something being dragged. Halford's pulse jumps. The capsule. Smitty nods. Yes, sir. They moved it inside. A metallic thump echoes faintly. Someone's bolting something down, Smitty adds. Securing it. Halford clenches his jaw. meaning they're preparing for transit. Harris raises an eyebrow. You think they're leaving the area tonight? Hal Ford shakes his head. No, they're leaving right now. The sonar suddenly blooms with a new echo. Brim! Smitty flinches. Con. Engine vibration spike. The yacht just powered up. The control room stiffens. Hal Ford grabs the rail. They're making a break for it. But then something else happens. Something Hal Ford doesn't expect. The vibrations vanish. Gone. Silent again. Harris frowns. What the hell was that? Smitty listens carefully. They're not running. They just tested their engines. Hal Ford tilts his head. They're checking if we're close. A trap. A decoy spike. A sonar lure. Hal Ford mutters. Whoever they are, they know how to play in the deep. Smitty stiffens again. Con. Hatch movement on the yacht. Something just opened. Hal Ford leans in. What kind of hatch? Smitty fine-tunes the signal. Underside access port. They're deploying something. Small, round metallic. Harris whispers. A mine. Smitty shakes his head slowly. No, sir. Lighter. Faster. With fins. Hal Ford's eyebrow twitches. A buoy. Smitty nods. Yes, sir. Some kind of buoy. But it's strange. Hal Ford's voice drops. How strange. Smitty adjusts the gain. It's scanning. Sonar pulses small, directional like a camera flash. Harris mutters. They're sweeping the water for anything following them. Hal Ford whispers. They're looking for us. The buoy spins slowly beneath the yacht, sending out tiny sonar pings like the chirps of a mechanical bird. Ping, ping, ping. Smitty calls out. Con, buoy is scanning down. Hal Ford sucks in a breath. Helm, hold us steady. If that buoy sees us, this mission ends. The Seawolf freezes in the thermocline, hiding in the thermal distortion like a ghost behind a curtain. The buoy pings again. Ping, ping, ping. Smitty whispers every movement. It's rotating, sweeping, coming around. Hal Ford's knuckles turn white. Ping, ping, and the buoy stops. Then, ping, 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 ping. Faster, sharper, urgent. Smitty's eyes widen. Con. The buoy has a lock. Hal Ford's heart drops in his boots. On us. No, sir, Smitty shouts. On someone else. Hal Ford's eyes shoot open. Who? Smitty cranks the gain, and a new acoustic signature explodes onto the screen. Rumbling. Metal. Screws. Huge displacement. Smitty screams. Con. A submarine is approaching the yacht. A big one. Unknown origin. Harris stumbles back. What the hell? Another nation. Hal Ford whispers. No. No, no, no. That's not a NATO profile. A cold realization sweeps the room. This wasn't the Soviets. This wasn't NATO. This wasn't the mercenary yacht. Something older. Something deadlier. Something that should not be in these waters. Smitty's voice breaks. Sir, it's a long-hull design. Very deep signature. Acoustic. Matching. He hesitates, horrified. Hal Ford growls. Matching what? Smitty whispers. A World War II German U-boat profile. The room stops. Breaths freeze. Harris shakes his head violently. That's impossible. We just saw the Megaboat wreck. Smitty interrupts, trembling. Sir, this one is alive. Hal Ford stares into the black water above them. A forgotten Nazi submarine. Still running. Still submerged. 27 years after the war ended. And moving straight toward the mercenary yacht. June 15th, 1972. North Atlantic thermocline boundary, 360 feet below. Aboard USS Seawolf. Smitty's voice cracks from the sonar shack. Con, unknown submarine closing. Size approximately 250 to 300 feet. Hull contour elongated. Old-style rivet diffraction pattern. Sir. Hal Ford jaw tightens. Say it. Smitty swallows hard. Acoustic signature matches a Type XXI U-boat. Silence floods the control room. A Type XXI, the Nazi electric boat. The most advanced submarine of World War II. The blueprint for the entire Cold War undersea arms race. But every Type XXI had either been scuttled, scrapped, or captured in 1945. Every one, except the one above them. Harris whispers, stunned. That class of sub hasn't been in the water for 3 decades. Hal Ford replies. Apparently, one never left. Smitty continues, voice barely steady. Con, U-boat is approaching the yacht at 4 knots. Running deep quiet. Controlled. This isn't a derelict. Halford finishes. It's crude. The words hit the crew like a punch to the lungs. A crude World War II submarine. In 1972, in the middle of a black-budget heist. Harris looks shaken. If that's real, that means there's a crew that survived the war. Kept the boat operational for decades. Halford nods once. But why reveal themselves now? Smitty's eyes widen. Con, U-boat is surfacing beneath the yacht. Halford snaps toward helm. Give me visual scope now. Aye, sir. The periscope rises through black water. Halford leans into the eyepiece, and everything inside him goes cold. Under the yacht, the ocean ripples, a distortion of rising pressure. Then it appears, a long, black hole surfacing from below like a sea monster waking from a grave. Sleek, silent, predatory, a Type XXI U-boat. Its conning tower scrapes against the yacht's reinforced keel, perfectly aligned with the underside hatch. Like a key turning in a lock. Harris whispers, "They're docking." Halford doesn't blink. This wasn't improvisation. This was a schedule. In sonar, Smitty shouts, Con, contact noise. The yacht is lowering something down. Halford moves closer. A cradle. Smitty nods. Metal arms. They're guiding the capsule down into the U-boat. The capsule. The object from the Nazi megaboat. The thing people died for in the wreck. Being transferred to the submarine that built it. Smitty's voice trembles. Con, capsule entering the U-boat hull. Halford's heart pounds. They're reclaiming it. Harris mutters. So the megaboat was a vault. And this sub was the retrieval team. Halford shakes his head. No, this sub is the insurance policy. A long-forgotten Nazi black program. A vessel meant to disappear. Resurface only if the vault was ever found. It just resurfaced. In 1972, suddenly the sonar screams. Con, U-boat powering up. Turbine hum growing. Halford snaps into command mode. They're trying to escape with the capsule. Harris asks, do we pursue? Halford hesitates, just 1 second, because chasing a ghost sub from 1945 wasn't in any Navy manual. Then, yes, we do. The U-boat releases the yacht's hull. Slowly, quietly, like a predator slipping from cover. Smitty calls out, U-boat descending. Fast, bearing 170. Depth increasing, 300, 350, 400. Halford steels himself. They're heading back into the trench. Harris inhales sharply. They're trying to lose us in the megaboat wreck. Halford nods. That's where they came from. That's where they know how to vanish. He steps into the center of the room. All hands, prepare for pursuit. The crew braces, because they are about to chase a submarine. That history says cannot exist. Into a graveyard of Nazi secrets. To recover a capsule no nation admits exists. Halford whispers, if that U-boat makes it home, we lose the Cold War in ways no one will ever see coming. He turns toward helm. Take us down. We're going after it. The Seawolf angles into the black. Into the abyss. Into the past. June 15th, 1972. North Atlantic Abyssal Trench Entry. 780 feet below. Aboard USS Seawolf. Ahead of them, the ancient U-boat moves with terrifying grace. Silent. Faster than a ship that old has any right to be. A long shadow slicing through the dark. A relic resurrected. Smitty whispers through the sonar shack. Con, U-boat at 840 feet. Bearing steady. Running deep quiet. This thing moves like a modern fast attack. Halford's eyes tighten. She's been upgraded. Harris frowns. Upgraded by who? She shouldn't even exist. Halford nods grimly. Unless someone kept her alive. In sonar, the U-boat's signature begins to warp. Not disappearing, but blending into the mineral-rich canyon walls. Smitty, Halford says they're masking. Yes, sir. They're using the terrain. Very good. Very practiced. Halford exhales. They know this canyon better than we do. Harris mutters. They've had 27 years to memorize it. Suddenly, KRNNK, KRRRK. A vibration runs through the trench. Smitty stiffens. Megaboat wrecked dead ahead. We're entering the graveyard. Halford steps closer to the screen. Visualize the layout. The sonar bloom reveals the ghostly outline of the massive German transport sub, the Megaboat, lying cracked open across the ravine like a rusted skeleton. The U-boat's signature slides into its shadow and vanishes. Smitty's voice shakes. Contact lost. Harris whispers. Captain, we're blind. Halford shakes his head slowly. No, they didn't disappear. He leans over the chart table. They went inside. The room goes still. Smitty adjusts frequencies. Gain up, gain down, directional sweeps. Nothing. Harris takes a step closer to Halford. Sir, it's suicide to follow them into that wreck. Halford keeps staring at the map. It's suicide not to. Harris lowers his voice. We're a nuclear fast attack submarine, not a tin can. We can't fit through those passages. Halford nods. We don't need to fit through them. He turns. We shadow from the outside. Track resonance. Track movement. They have to exit somewhere. Smitty's eyes snap open. Metal on metal inside the wreck. Movement. They're scraping along an interior bulkhead. Halford smiles. That's their mistake. Smitty increases sensitivity. I've got them. Inside the Megaboat's starboard cargo corridor. Harris glances at the sonar display. A sub inside a sub. Christ. Halford looks like steel forged under pressure. They're navigating internal passageways the Soviets didn't even know existed. Smitty's voice trembles. Captain. They're moving toward the back of the Megaboat. Stern section. Halford taps the chart, heading for the escape channel. The aft flood doors. Harris blinks. Flood doors? They're operational. Halford shakes his head. No, but the space behind them might be. He leans over Smitty. Track the capsule. What's happening with it? Smitty listens closely. Metallic contact. Occasional clinks. Something being dragged along the deck. Halford. The capsule's with them. Smitty nods. Yes, sir. They're transporting it deeper. Harris mutters. They didn't steal it to escape with it. They stole it to deliver it somewhere. Smitty suddenly stiffens. Pressure change inside stern compartment. Halford snaps. What kind of pressure change? Smitty swallows. Water displacement. Rising. Something behind the bulkhead is filling or draining. Halford's eyes widen. They're opening a secondary exit. Harris whispers. A hidden egress tunnel at 900 feet. Smitty listens again. No tunnel, sir. Something else. Halford steps closer. Describe. Smitty adjusts the gain slowly, carefully, and then freezes. His voice is shaking. There's another hull back there. Halford goes still. A third submarine? Smitty nods, breathless. Yes, sir. Smaller. Buried under debris. But intact. Very faint acoustic signature. They're transferring the capsule toward it. Halford's eyes widen. A nested submarine system. Layered vessels. Harris whispers. This was never a vault ship. Halford finishes. It was a submarine storage facility. The Megaboat wasn't a transport. It was a hangar, a mothership, a mobile undersea base. And whatever is in the capsule is meant for something inside. Smitty gasped suddenly. Movement accelerating. They just loaded the capsule into the smaller sub. Halford's pulse thunders. And they're going to launch it. Smitty nods. Yes, sir. They're powering something up. Electric motor signatures rising. A launch cradle is shifting. Halford whispers. They're about to release a submarine hidden since 1945. He turns to the helm. Take us out of the trench. Clear their launch path. Silent running. Because the next few seconds would decide everything. June 15th, 1972. North Atlantic Abyssal Trench. 940 feet below. Aboard USS Seawolf. Inside that steel corpse, a second presence moves. Something smaller. Sharper. Alive. Smitty's voice trembles through the dim red lighting. Secondary hull activity increasing. Electric motors spooling up. Charging capacitors. Sir, they're powering a launch cradle. Halford feels the deck vibrate beneath his boots. Not from Seawolf, but from the ancient machinery awakening inside the Megaboat. Harris whispers. How the hell is anything operational in there after 27 years? Halford answers without looking up. They maintained it. Inside sonar, an eerie hum grows. HRM, HRM, HRM. Not Soviet, not American, not anything modern. A World War II-era electric turbine, resurrected from the dead. Smitty flinches, pressing the headphones tight. Con, something's locking into rails, sliding, being aligned. Halford narrows his eyes. The smaller sub. Harris swallows hard. A Nazi parasite sub designed to launch from inside a megaboat? That's insane. Halford replies. It's genius. A hidden courier. Suddenly, a deep metallic CLUNK echoes across sonar. Smitty gasps. Con, launch cradle locked. Another sound. KRNNNN, TCHHHHH gay. Hydraulics. Old but still working. Still hungry. Harford mutters. Jesus, they actually maintained all this. Harris looks at the map, pale. We're not just watching history. We're watching a secret arm of World War II that never ended. Inside the megaboat wreck, chaos pulses through sonar. Footsteps. Shouting. Metal scraping. Then, Smitty's voice spikes. Con, capsule secured inside the parasite sub. Halford straightens sharply. That's their objective. That's what this entire operation was about. Smitty nods. They're sealing the hatch. Pressure, equalizing, powering internal lights. Halford breathes in slowly. They're preparing to launch. A violent shudder booms through the trench. Thud. Thud. TH. RRRNNKKKK. Smitty nearly falls forward. Con. Soviet mini-sub has rammed the megaboat. They're trying to break inside. Harris snaps. They're desperate. Halford clenches the rail. They're too late. Smitty cries out. Con. Parasite sub-motors at max torque. Cradle retracting. She's moving. Halford bellows. Helm. Clear their vector. Now. The Seawolf surges backward, engines whispering, hiding behind the rock wall, just as the megaboat unleashes something unseen for 27 years. Smitty screams into the mic. Con launch. A sound like thunder rolling underwater explodes through sonar. Foom. Whoosh. Clang. A compact vessel rockets out of the megaboat's stern, ripping through clouds of silt, trailing a halo of ancient rust. Halford catches the silhouette through the periscope. A dagger-shaped mini-submarine, angular and predatory, no bigger than a city bus, but moving with terrifying precision. Not Soviet, not Allied, not civilian. Pure German engineering. Frozen in time. Awakened. Harris whispers. I don't believe this. The parasite sub angles upward sharply, heading for open water. Smitty calls out. Con. Soviet mini-sub reversing. They missed the launch. Halford nods. They lost the capsule. Then he points into the dark. But we haven't. The parasite sub ascends, gaining speed with every second. Smitty tracks it urgently. Bearing 085. Depth 600 feet and rising. Speed 8 knots 1013. Captain, this thing is fast. Halford snaps. Helm pursuit course. Quiet running. The Seawolf pivots, slicing through the trench like a steel shadow. Harris leans close to Halford, voice low. Sir, if that sub reaches the surface, if it rendezvous with a carrier, a tanker, a freighter, anything, that capsule disappears forever. Halford nods. And so does every clue to what the Nazis buried at the bottom of the Atlantic. He looks forward, eyes burning. We cannot let that boat reach daylight. The Seawolf accelerates. Silent, relentless, hunting a ghost from the past. This wasn't just a chase. This was a final race. Against a war that refused to die. June 15th, 1972. North Atlantic surface corridor, 290 feet below. Aboard USS Seawolf. Ahead of them, a darting silhouette. Angular, predatory, fast. The parasite U-boat, the Nazi Phantom, climbs toward the surface like it remembers what sunlight tastes like. Smitty shouts over sonar. Con, parasite sub-leveling at 250. Maintaining speed, 12 knots, 14, 16, Captain, this thing moves like a damn torpedo. Halford steadies himself on the rail. They're reaching rendezvous depth. There's something waiting for them. Harris turns sharply. A ship. Halford nods once. Something running dark. Smitty adjusts gain, and a faint rumble appears. New contact above the parasite sub. Large displacement. No running lights. No ID. Halford exhales. There's the meeting point. The last transfer point. The last chance to escape. The parasite sub slows beneath the dark hull above. A shadow barely visible through the thinning layer of ocean. Smitty stammers. They're prepping to surface under the target's keel. Halford mutters. They're going to hand off the capsule. But then something strange happens. The parasite sub stops completely, like a machine following orders older than the men operating it. Smitty presses the headphones tight. Vibrations spike. They're opening something, small hatch just above the bow. Harris frowns. A delivery port? Halford shakes his head. No. A launch tube. Smitty gasps. Object emerging. Small. Metallic. Rising fast. Halford's eyes narrow. They're sending the capsule up on its own. A buoyant canister. One purpose. One way. Hidden from sensors. Toward the ship above. Toward escape. Track it, Halford orders coldly. Smitty does. Bearing 055. Depth rising 230-220. And the parasite sub? Halford asks. Smitty listens. Holding position. Motors off. Silent. Halford frowns. Why isn't it moving? Harris offers the only explanation. It was built for one mission, sir. A chill crawls up Halford's spine. A one-way trip. The parasite sub begins to drift. Power failing. Its life spent on delivering the capsule. Smitty whispers. I think the battery banks just died. She's dead in the water. Halford nods solemnly. A ghost delivering a ghost. All eyes return to the capsule. Smitty shouts. Capsule approaching 150 feet. Helm, Halford commands, angle up. Shadow it. We cannot lose it. The Seawolf rises like a steel specter. The ship above, whatever it is, remains silent and waiting. Then, a faint metallic clang through sonar. Capsule made contact with the target hull. Smitty yells. They're retrieving it. Halford's blood turns cold. They've got it. They've won. Unknown actors. Unknown flag. Unknown agenda. Whoever they were. They now held the only surviving artifact from the Nazi megaboat. The room sinks into dread. Harris whispers. What do we do, sir? Halford's jaw works. He thinks. Calculates. Weighs the world. Then, he makes his decision. Helm. The officer turns. Sir. Halford inhales. Bring us up to 90 feet. No closer. Aye, sir. The Seawolf climbs. The dark hull of the unknown vessel looms above. A giant shadow with no name, no flag, no lights. Smitty listens, trembling. They're powering engines. Halford's eyes narrow. They're about to leave. The unknown ship rumbles to life. Low, deep, predatory. Harris whispers. Sir, do we intervene? Halford closes his eyes. If the Seawolf surfaced, if they exposed themselves, a Cold War confrontation would explode. A NATO submarine intercepting an unidentified vessel carrying a German relic delivered by a U-boat that shouldn't exist? No admiral, no president, no intelligence officer would survive the fallout. Halford opens his eyes. No. Harris stares at him. Sir, we record, we witness, and we live. He nods at Smitty. Mark their bearing. Mark their sound profile. Send everything home when we clear the ice line. The XO takes a shaky breath. And the capsule? Halford looks up through the steel above their heads. We'll hunt it again. Someday. Somewhere. The unknown vessel accelerates into the night. Silent as a legend. Vanishing into the fog. The Seawolf drifts downward into the deep once more. A ghost returning to the sea. Because some secrets aren't won in battle. Some secrets aren't lost in a war. Some secrets, wait, in the Cold War, just inherited one more.